Hey folks, today we're covering Tinto Talks 70, and today Pavia is going to be talking to us about a very impactful era of history, especially as EU5 is earlier than EU4 in the time frame of history, and this is going to be the 100 Years' War between England and France. Historically, this war started in May 1337 when Philip confiscated the Duchy of Aquitaine from Edward of England, the reason being that he breached his obligations as a vassal, because if you didn't know, England was technically a vassal of France at this point. We won't go into it here, but it's very interesting if you want to read up about it. And this was responded to by Edward by claiming the throne of France himself through the rights of his mother, Isabella of France. So he kind of pulled out the Uno card and said, hey, I'm not your vassal. I'm actually the king of France. What are you going to do about it? And then the 100 Years' War kind of spiraled out of everything that happened here. They do say the situation was way more complicated than this, and obviously it was way more complicated than 2 lines of text could ever say, but Pavia's going to go into how this will play out in the game. And again, this isn't everything. He is just showing us a slice of what happens during this situation and how it will play out. So the first thing you see here is in the game, a couple of years after the game does start, so in June 1337, this event will trigger in France. England grants refuge to Robert d'Artois. The King of England has granted the disgraced Lord Robert refuge. For the last few years, Robert has avoided the summons of the King of France for his crimes of forgery in an attempt to siege the county of Artois. And then you could say, demand King Edward surrender the fugitive lord, or provoking the English court would be ill-advised. If you do the top option, you can see that here. Should the king refuse, we will assert our claim on Aquitaine, granting us cause on it. So as France, you will get these core claims on Aquitaine. It will draw us closer to a war with England, but you will gain 10 prestige if you do that. If you choose the other option, provoking the English court, you will gain 7 stability, but you will lose 10 prestige. Robert may encourage the king to press his claim on France through Dame Isabella, the she-wolf Capet, against our Salic law. So again, really what happened here, they might come in and say, hey, I should be the King of England and France. Obviously, the other side of this is what happens if you're England. So French courts demands the surrender of Robert d'Artois. The other side, basically, of what we've already talked about. Defy the French king and make preparations to invade France, or the current status quo must be respected. Surrender Sir Robert. If you do the top option, the French court will see this as a violation of Edward's vassal obligations. England will get cause on the county of Artois in the province of Arras, along with the province of Ames. And then should England conquer the portions of Artois, we may grant Sir Robert these territories and make him a vassal. The societal values will change towards belligerent instead of conciliatory for England. They will gain the invasion of France preparations for 10 months. You will also gain 25 army tradition, and you will also get the throne of France casus belli for 4 years, meaning you can declare war on France to try take that under the control of the English. If you choose the other option, the current status quo must be respected. Relations between English and French courts will stabilize for now, plus 7 stability, minus 15 prestige. You will gain 120 opinion of the Kingdom of France. Robert d'Artois moves to the Kingdom of France, and the Kingdom of France also gains that respect back for you. So you could avoid this happening, or at least it would sound that way. And then, as we've seen through all of those historical options, the ones with the book open, they're always like the historical options for these kind of events across the whole game. You can see here what will happen if you choose the historical options. The crown of France. The King of England claims that they are the rightful throne, as we do not agree that the ruler of France should be determined through Salic law, as they view King Edward as having a better claim. The English are fools. Many people would agree with this, but that is the option you can see. England gain the throne of France casus belli, and then gain unique actions such as influence French subjects and request papal delegates through the situation panel, and they're going to show off the situation panel in a minute. You can also see here the situation starts, and you will see there 100 Years' War situation. This has begun, and then you will play out through it. So you can see the situation panel here. The 100 Years' War started on the 1st of June in this example. King Edward of England, King Philippe of France, and then the strength of both sides of these. Now, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here. In my video I did at the announcement of Europa Universalis 5, I was playing as Scotland. There was kind of a sneaky thing you could do with this, because usually you can't see how powerful another nation's army is. But if the 100 Years' War is active and you're Scotland, you can see this information panel, and you can actually see how powerful England is. Now, it is a percentage. I don't think it shows you exactly how big their army is, but this was quite cool as Scotland, because if France was winning, you could look here and go, oh, England's strength is 10%. So I'm going to go in and attack England because their armies have obviously lost. They're not very powerful. I could probably quickly go in there and grab it. You can even join the 100 Years' War as Scotland and then join them in the wars and things like that. So even outside of England and Scotland, this information panel is very interesting for you to make other decisions depending on who you're playing as. Maybe you're in Scotland, Ireland, maybe you're even on the continent somewhere. If you could see this, it actually gives you a lot of information that could be useful for you. But anyway, getting back to what we're actually talking about today, you can see the diplomatic actions here as well. Declare war on the Kingdom of England, find new allies. Again, when playing as Scotland, France came to me and said, hey, can you be in an alliance with us? That will be very useful. Yes, we're going to drag you into these wars, but then I could get some concessions out of them as well. You see the main actions, request papal delegates. They're going to talk about that later on and how that works. And then grant subject titles. They're going to cover that as well. You can see in this example, defenders of England, defenders of France. That would be where all the different nations kind of filter into, depending on what they're getting up to as part of this situation. The next screenshot is the map of this. You can see the Kingdom of England. You can see Wales. I believe they've kind of divided Wales up even more than they have previously. I think this was covered in a previous map dev diary, but you can see Wales very, fragmented. I think you can kind of bring that together a little bit as you play through the game. But you can see as well, France, they do point out here the kind of like hash-marked counties, or duchies, I suppose, like Anjou, Brittany, Normandy. They're ones that are disloyal to France, but are part of France at this time. And they're going to go into like how that plays out during this situation in a second as well. In the next couple of screenshots, they're going to show off the victory conditions. So in this first one, you can see England. France does not exist. The ultimate dream of Englishmen. France is a subject of England, or England has enforced the Union with France peace treaty, and you can see that little pop out as well. This will create a union between England and France, and then I think that would be an IO to begin with, and then you could ultimately bring them together under one title, if I do remember correctly. And then next they're going to show off the French victory conditions, the top one being England does not exist. Again, the dreams of French and Scottish people. I am joking, guys, but, only partially. Less than 4 locations in France are currently owned by England. Now, I will say, when I played this, it was very hard for France to win, because in peace deals, France would never actually take locations in France from England. They do other things like get war reparations, the typical kind of EU4 peace deals. But I would imagine before the game comes out, they'll probably change that to kind of weight them towards making sure they take locations, because then they can get to a point through that condition to actually winning. Like, I'm sure it did sometimes happen, but in the games I played, it would often be that France would win a lot of these wars, but they wouldn't actually take the locations in the peace deal, or they'd take like 1 or 2. And they've obviously, as you can see, got to get it from 23 in this example down to less than 4. And that is going to take a lot of wars if you're not doing it in like bulk each time. So hopefully that does change. I'm sure it will. That feedback was given, so I'm sure that will change before the game does come out. You can also see the strength comparison here, as I was talking about previously. So England's military strength, you can see their army size, you can see their potential levy, and then France, you can see the same. Again, I'm not sure if you're not involved with this, that you can see the specific numbers. Maybe you can, but it looks like if you're in the situation directly, you can see the army size on both sides and their potential levies. And obviously, if this drags on for a long time, you're getting into professional armies, things like that. Again, in the example I had, professional armies spawned in Paris, and then they just like ruffle stomped England, because once they got that spread enough, picked up the advances they could get quicker than England, their armies were just so much more powerful. They just absolutely destroyed England. It was great. It was really good fun. Because of Scotland, I joined in and took all the north of England. I think this situation is really interesting. I think it's going to be one of these things. People complained, I think, about EU5 starting earlier than EU4, but it brings in these whole different bits of history, like the 100 Years' War, and you can play this out now. And this, I think, could be something similar to people wanting to be like Byzantiums versus Ottomans in EU4, trying to play that out, the rise of the Ottomans, even more so than you will see in EU5. I think something like the 100 Years' War is going to be an area that people play a lot. People like playing as these realms anyway, but it's going to be very interesting to play it out different ways and see what happens. These additional history points and how you can play them out. And, we don't have this in Crusader Kings 3, so what else are you going to do? But anyway, let's get back to it. The next thing they're going to show is that Throne of France Casus Belli. So the impact of winning the 100 Years' War goal. And you can see the breakdown here, how that works and how you're going to try do that as England. You can see again here, the kind of flip of this if you are France, the war goal for defending the throne of France and how that works out as well. And then obviously when the war is declared, you can see it here, very similar to EU4, a very similar kind of notification. Obviously looks that little bit different, but you can see the same kind of information here. Who's on which side? You can see the England side obviously here, all the different counties, duchies, Wales, Aquitaine, the Pale in Ireland, etc. And they're going to be coming in, helping England and seeing how this works out. You can see in the next screenshot the first phase of the 100 Years' War. So this is obviously the first war that happens. And then if there's peace and then another war happens, that would then be the second phase of the 100 Years' War, and then that just continues till the war ends. But you can see in this one, the war score at the moment, and then what is affecting that, what's making that war score happen, and then that will change as you win things, do blockades, take land off each other, all those kind of things. And then in the situation panel, this will update as this war is declared. So you can see in here, England's strength 45%, France 54%, so obviously the opposite of what England's is generally. And then the first phase of the 100-year war diplomatic action, declare war on England, obviously grayed out because there is a war. You can negotiate peace, and you can find new allies even if the war is happening, and then try bring them into the war. Next, they're going to talk about the request papal delegates. We saw this earlier, and they're going to go through how this works. So the senseless war between us and our foe has dragged on for long enough. It is time to request a mediator to enforce peace between the two sides. So this is where you're going to the Pope and saying like, hey, can you really stop this war? I'm probably losing, I would imagine, but I really don't want to lose more. So please go to England, go to France, and tell them to stop attacking me. Let's get this finished. And you can see how that plays out here. And then the other option that we saw earlier was grant subject titles. And how this will work is the objective for France will be to rein them in and have them contribute towards the war effort in the conflict phases. But for England, it's all about convincing them to abandon the French king in the peace phases. So if you're at war, France can kind of, go over to them, say like, hey, do you actually want to help me defend against England? And then during the peaceful eras, England can go to them and say like, hey, why don't you abandon France? Come join England. We'll have a right old time. And you can see that here, grant subject titles. By granting titles to our strongest subjects, we will improve the chances of keeping them on our side and away from the English influence. And you can see in this example, you've got Flanders, Normandy, Artois, and you can see they will gain some opinion, and they will also gain strong diplomacy for 5 years. It doesn't say what that does, but I imagine they just stay very loyal and they help you out, all that kind of stuff. And then obviously, if you're on the other side of this, if you're England, sowing the seeds of doubt and division between the Kingdom of France and their subjects will help us greatly. And you can see the effect of this. The selected French subject may be convinced not to join any defensive wars for the next 5 years. In this example, for 300 gold, I imagine that probably scales. Maybe it is always 300, but anyway, that is what you see here. And then if you do that, they will then not join France in these wars, and that's going to help you ultimately beat France. Or potentially beat France, at least give you that better chance of doing so. And then obviously outside of that, you don't have to play as England or France to be involved. You could play as one of those subjects of France and then play through all that as well. So if you have that, you have some different main actions because you're also involved in this. So you could demand autonomy from the Kingdom of France, you could demand border adjustment, or you could betray our allegiance. I think we all know what that third one does, but they are going to break those down. So the first one, demand autonomy from the Kingdom of France. We must leverage our influence against that of our overlord in order to receive special privileges that will only benefit us and our prosperity. And then you and France will have this event chain where things will happen between the two of you, you as a vassal and the King of France. If you choose the middle option, demand border adjustment, it has come to our attention that our neighbouring peers, fellow subjects of the great Kingdom of France, currently control parts of France that we actually think are parts of our realm. This matter must be pursued with the utmost urgency, lest we risk losing valuable lands. So in here, you can go to the king and say like, hey, I'll keep supporting you, but why don't you give me that land that this other vassal of yours has, and then I'll stick around and help in this war. And then obviously, they've got to decide if they want to do that or not. And then the last one, betray our allegiance, the tides of war change, and it's all about switching over to the English and saying, look, England's going to win, I'm going to go join them, and then I'll get something better out of the King of England. Maybe I won't, but, I don't know that at the moment. And then you will get this shifting allegiances event, and they're going to show that off next. For quite some time now, the status of the first phase of the 100 Years' War has left us very displeased. Despite the assurances of France, many of our advisors support the idea of turning against them. It would be wise to remove ourselves from the conflict, or we cannot afford another hostile neighbour. They do say then, at the end of the day, one of the contenders will probably be strong enough to defeat the other. In the case of France, it's straightforward. No more independent English presence on the continent. In the case of England, besides pure conquest, the claim the throne of France peace goal requests the following. So England or their subjects must control at least 15% of the ownable locations in the French region, and then England must also control the capital of France. The cost of this treaty also depends on two factors: the base cost of it, and then a fluctuating cost depending entirely on the relative strength between the two countries. So a stronger England would make these peace options cheaper. So if you're very powerful, if you've absolutely destroyed the French army, it's going to be a lot cheaper for you to get this peace deal out of France. And then, they don't really exist anymore, so it's all great. Next, they're going to show us some events that are linked to this, but may not be related directly to England and France. The first one here being the Scots king in exile. Ever since the Battle of Halidon Hill in 1333, King David and his closest advisors have lived in exile in France under the protection of the king. And then you can choose here, grant King David the resources of the court, so then they can go cause some problems. If you do remember, at the beginning of the game, Scotland has a civil war going on against Balliol and the regent, and then you will play that out as well. But this is obviously going to Scotland and saying like, hey, here's some more stuff. Maybe you can help me in this war against England. We will support the king and his cause. Or you can say the Scots' cause is lost, the king must return. Or the fourth option, betray Scotland, offer the King of Scotland to King Edward of England for support. I guess if you're trying to back out of this and see what happens. The next event they're going to show is mercenaries in the 100 Years' War. So a mercenary company is gathered in London, drawn by the bloodshed between England and France, sensing an opportunity for some profit. Let them fight for our coin, and you can see, cost you 200 gold in this example, and they will join you with a leader, Sir Edgar, and they will help you in this war. Or you can say, dismiss them, and they obviously don't join you, but maybe they'll go and join France and help them on their side. You can see in the next one, the Jacquerie Rebellion. The relations between the nobles and the commoners have reached a boiling point, and now the peasantry have begun to rise in a disorderly manner across all of France. And this is very much going to hinder you as France. You can say, call upon the nobles, and then this will give them some estate satisfaction, but then a selection of your population, in this example, in 11 provinces, will join this faction. We will gain nobles crushing rebellion for 10 years, and the Jacquerie will lose 25% progress. So, you might be able to prevent them actually rebelling fully if you do this. Now, one thing I want to call out, as you can see in the background, the map here, I think they've changed these icons a few times for like major cities. I really dislike how these look. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. They just don't look like they fit on the map. I'm sure these are placeholders still, and they will change before the game comes out. But they just look so out of place. I think it's like the colors, like they're not as saturated as the background colors of the map. They just look super odd to me. But anyway, let me know what you think. Hopefully that does change. I can't remember how they look in EU4, but they just look slightly weird here versus how the map looks. And then the last event they're going to show is around a very famous person, Joan of Arc, as we would call her in England, but obviously the French name you can see here. So as 1431 progresses, France finds itself at a crossroad. The constant humiliating defeats at the hand of the English has left the military and civil leadership demoralized and discredited. And then obviously Joan of Arc comes in and causes some problems. It's a very interesting story. I think the Joan of Arc story, a lot of people don't realize like how it ultimately ended. You really should go read up about it if you don't know. But you can see the two options here, but paid heed he did, so he listened to what she said. Joan of Arc will be allowed to lead troops. We will gain 10 army tradition. She moves to the Kingdom of France, and she gains the Maid of Orleans for 24 years. And then in the next screenshot, you can see the character profile for her. You can see if these are her stats in game, it is crazy. 99, 93, 93. Put her in command of your army and just see what you get up to. So that'd be really fun playing that out. I wonder if you can have like alternate history. I bet you can't, obviously, but it would be fun if she just went to England instead. If France say, no, we don't believe you at all. She gets a bit disgruntled. Maybe she switched sides and goes to England and then she would help them out. Obviously not going to happen. But I think that would be pretty fun. I'm sure there'll be some mods maybe that do something crazy like that. But anyway, that is where the Dev Diary is going to end this week. They do say next week we're going to be talking about France, so a lot of French content this week. Let me know what you think about the Dev Diary. Like I said, when I got to play the game, this was a really fun situation, even if you weren't involved with it directly. Like I say, as Scotland, I took advantage of this. I'm sure other realms can do. If you're around France, if they're losing, you could try attack them and take some things for yourselves as well. But yeah, I think this will be really fun. Let me know what you think in the comments, but we'll leave it there for today. As always, hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you are new here. I'm covering all the Dev Diaries news, all those kind of things around EU5. And then I also cover Crusader Kings 3 in a very similar manner. I do twice weekly live streams where we play the game, do achievements, play mods, all that kind of stuff. Do subscribe and you can see all that in the future. But we'll leave it there for today, and I'll catch you all in the next one.